Preocupado el presidente anaranjado, viendo que las elecciones las perdió.
Solicita a los que le hacen los mandados que se apuren, pues la fiesta terminó.
Y mirando que se va a acabar el varo,
han formado un titingo. Se han negado a abandonar la Casa Blanca, a la silla del despacho se amarró. Los pelitos que le quedan los arranca, pataleando por la rabia que le dio. Y mirando a Cuba con sus batas blancas, de cabeza se tiró.
El que tenga confusión que se confunda, el que quiera claridad que venga a ver.
La jugada no es compleja ni profunda, está claro cómo quieren proceder.
Solo falta que nosotros los dejemos,
y eso no va a suceder.
Con la conga de los hoyos no te metas.
Cuba viva sin que nadie la someta. Mi tierra linda, mi cubanía, mi bandera se respeta. De La Habana para Santiago, defiende lo tuyo, cubano.
que no te metas con mi tierra, que mi Cuba se respeta.
Soy el mambí que aún vive con el machete en la mano. No, 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 no. ¿Qué me importa si comentas?
De donde vengo yo, estamos listos para la contienda. Aguanta ahí, pero dime tú, ¿pa' qué tú inventas? Con mi pueblo guarachando, yo vine aquí para cantar. Toda Cuba está esperando que yo la ponga a gozar.
Aquí nadie tiene miedo, tú conmigo no te metas. ¡Hey! Oye, soquetón, mi alegría te molesta.
Porque tú me conoces bien en todas mis facetas. Que no tenemos miedo, sal de ahí, no abra esa gaveta.
Greetings, everyone. You are tuned in to our Thursday weekly Pan-African news. My name is Monica, and this is Onyesawu. We are members of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, and we are calling in from our sharing from Tiwa territory, that's so-called Albuquerque, New Mexico. And the All-African Revolutionary Party is a Pan-African socialist organization organizing to unify a socialist Africa. And our goal is to organize all African people, as well as to, when unifying Africa, meaning that our land is back and Africa belongs to us, and our people's needs are being met. And so we are just so excited for you all to be in this space with us as we continue to struggle against settler colonialism, imperialism and fight to organize our people no matter wherever our people are. Because when Africa is free, all of our people will be free. For the show, we do several things, and one is to share about what AAPRP is. The next thing that we also do is call in an ancestor. And I am honored with my comrade today to call in Kwame Ture, who will be turning 80 on June 29th. And I'm going to be reading some information about Kwame Ture. So Kwame Ture was an organizer with SNCC, and he participated in sit-ins, freedom strikes, voter registration drive, in the deep racist south of this country. He was arrested numerous times and battled against white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan, including the FBI, which represents white supremacy as well. Kwame Ture became the chairperson of SNCC, and he's known for popularizing Black power. And I think that's important because he also later on in life identified as African. And why we identify as African, because it connects us to our people no matter where we are in our heritage. So I think that's so important to remember. And he talks about it in so many ways of why we're African. And also in 1967, he became an honorary prime minister of the Black Panther Party. And the move to forge unity between the Black Panthers as well as SNCC. And also traveled all over the country teaching different practices around organizing. Kwame, he called for African Unified Front of all African organizations struggling against racist oppression. And that became like his lifelong dedication work is educating us through political education as well as working on Pan-Africanism. Kwame had a tremendous understanding of U.S. imperialism, which led him to travel and support struggles in Palestine, in Cuba, in Vietnam, Ireland, Puerto Rico, North Korea. And he was able to forge relationships with so many different organizations in those areas, as well as oppressed indigenous groups here in the Americas. Under Kwame's leadership in SNCC denounced Zionist aggression toward Palestinian people and Arab people during the 1967 Israeli war. Kwame also played a leading role in organizing mass resistance against the U.S. aggression in Vietnam. In 1968, he also visited Hanoi and held discussions about Vietnam as well. Kwame is recognized on the importance and constants of sharing of why political education is critical for the liberation of African people. So here you're going to have some more political education that Onya Sawu is going to be sharing about Cuba. But in AAPRP, all members of AAPRP, no matter where they are, do work study twice a month. That's so critical. And then we also create spaces for access to free political education. And political education allows us to know the true essence of what's happening all over. That's really critical and important because what happens is the enemy, which is all imperialist forces as well as capitalism, will have us hating each other versus understanding what the root of the issue and the problem is. So political education has really phenomenally changed my life for sure. Kwame Ture served as a central committee member of the African People's Revolutionary Party and is a leading figure in global Pan-Africanism movement. His career focused on the struggle for decades in civil rights and anti-colonial movements and building mass revolutionary Pan-African parties. So Kwame transitioned in November 1998 after battling cancer, and he passed away in Guinea, which was his home for the final 30 years of his life. Kwame made tremendous contributions to the struggle for our people worldwide. And the beautiful thing about Kwame's work is it's on YouTube. It's everywhere you go. You can Google Kwame Ture and you can see every time he had a message about our people, every time he had a message about joining an organization, he had a message about just the solidarity work that needs to happen in between struggles as well. And so we bring into this space that we're in Kwame Ture, our ancestor. Next, what we do is a land acknowledgement. And I just want to acknowledge that we've continued to see land acknowledgements be symbolism, and that's not what APRP does. We organize in solidarity with the indigenous communities, and also fight for land back for our indigenous community. And so that is really critical. So land acknowledgement has to go beyond symbolism, because symbolism actually is empty promises. It doesn't mean anything. And like Onya Sabu has shared before, no matter how long something has been stolen, it needs to be returned. So this is Tiwa territory, this is Turtle Island, and it all needs to be turned back to indigenous people. And we organize in solidarity with them for their land back, as well as Africa for our land back, and Palestinian for their land back. So all groups should be having their land back, and we should be organizing in solidarity for all oppressed people to have their land back. So I'm going to do an update about something recently I did, and after that we're going to get into some political education with Onya Sabu. So I recently did a tour of the South, meeting different organizers with Millions for Prisoners. And in the tour of the South, we were able to go to several different spaces. And these spaces was a lot of political education, including meeting with local organizers that do prison abolition, who were themselves behind the walls. So in Texas, for example, we visited the Texas Prison Museum. And this museum, contrary to what people would think, what it does, it actually highlights and celebrates the prison industrial complex. And what it does is it actually uses our language and it highlights it. And in that space, this museum that people go to see is they're going to see the horrific acts of what the prison industry looks like, right? And so that prison museum should be burnt down, just like all prisons should be. But it was just very interesting how the portrayal of inhumane, of how they see people. And we know our people, especially in the South and actually across the country, are disproportionately represented in prisons. And so in that space, people could take a picture with a jump chute behind, prison bars. It had like art, and it was, selling things that people have made behind the walls, who won't be compensated for it. And so, it was really interesting experience to see that and see how it's glorified, and how we have a lot of work to do, for sure, like this whole entire trip. We were also able to go to Montgomery and visit the Legacy Museum Memorial. And what it did was it documented the lynchings of our people that happened from the 1800s to 1959. And there were over 2,000 lynchings that occurred. And young people and other adults also went to areas and gathered dirt from that area, and as a way to honor our people. And also what I really appreciate about the Legacy Museum is it talks about our resistance. And I have not seen enough of talking about our resistance of our people fighting back. And we need more and more of that. And so the museum is heavy. And we were able to also meet with young people who live in Mobile, Alabama, that are going through a lot of a lot of things, and young people being able to like visit and learn about how our people were kidnapped, the enslavement of our people, the profiting of our people, as well as the resistance of our people, and how powerful we are. And so appreciate like the work that Brian Stevenson is doing there. We also got to visit Africa Town, which they're working to rebuild because of gentrification. Our people have been displaced in that area. But after our people freed themselves and the Civil War, Africa Town was built in that space. And so they're working to like rebuild it, rebuild it because there was a lot of like industry pollution that happened in that area. And in New Orleans, we were able to visit the Whitney Plantation, and that is really heavy. And now I understand more about when our ancestors were fighting back, and like we talked about it, and what Harriet Tubman as well, how they burned the store. Because after the Civil War that happened, our ancestors were still living on plantations, right? And they were still being like doing forced labor and not paid. And the store kept a debt, like they had to pay to sleep in substandard, like horrible housing after they had like built these mansions, right, for the slavers that were living there. And so in the Whitney Plantation, it was preserved by Africans to talk about the brutality that happened. And people lived on that plantation to 1975. It's ridiculous. Because they had no other place to go, because there was no economic or other avenues for them to go to, because everything was still being controlled and owned by Europeans. And so the burning of the store was so significant because of the debt that our people had when they were living on these plantations after the Emancipation Proclamation, so after our people freed themselves. And what I appreciated about the Whitney Plantation is it even talked more about resistance than even the Legacy Museum. And so it was talking about the Maroons. So it talked about the Maroons and the Maroons fighting back, and the Maroons making settlements for their people to live and to also free up other people who were being enslaved. I like truly appreciated that. It had a lot of heavy history too. Like it documented like the horrors, like of our people being enslaved. That I don't want to utilize this space to talk about that, but utilize this space to talk about our resistance. And like lastly, in all of those spaces, so in Alabama and Louisiana and Texas and Mississippi, we met with organizers, and all organizers that we met with, except one city, were people had been 10, 20, 44 years plus behind the walls. And we were able to meet with Albert Woodfox, and he's a former Black Panther political prisoner. He's part of the Angola 3, and he was placed in solitary confinement for 44 years and 10 months. So he has a book that I am looking forward to reading, getting the audiobook as well, where he talks about how he was able to survive during that time. And he also continues like connecting to other organizers. And so just appreciate him, the fight that our ancestors have done for us, and be able to be in community with him and just learn more. And everybody we met with, we, like, as somebody who's an abolition, as somebody who's wanting to abolish prisons, learning more about the South and how the South, and how we say prisons are plantations. Literally in the South, prisons are on plantations. In Angola, there's 85 to 95% of the people who are there will end up like staying there or dying there. They have a cemetery there. People pick cotton. People can go on a freaking tour to tour the penitentiary. Again, like, people are so obsessed with punishment in this country. And so learning about what their work looked like Eric, for example, who's in Texas right now, but learning about what their organizing work looked like behind the walls, and then when they came outside and the connections they're able to continue to do, was to give people hope, to give people hope that they will come home, to give people hope that they have something worth fighting for themselves and fighting for the freedom of other people. And so that's like my biggest takeaway is the hope, and how it has to happen. It has to happen because they're killing us. They're killing us. They're poisoning our food. They're torturing our people behind the wall. They're murdering our people in Africa and other countries. They're putting sanctions on where it's killing people. So everywhere we turn, our people are under attack, no matter what. And it's all because of capitalism. And so the political education that I learned during that time, like I'm gonna always hold and cherish with me, and hope to like share more with others. And so, you know, again, my biggest takeaway is either we're gonna fight back, or they're just gonna kill us. You know, or the planet's gonna be gone in what, 12 years. So we're gonna either die from them harming the planet, or they're just gonna continue to like kill us off. And in every way, in every aspect. Like for example, in Louisiana, it's Louisiana and another state. I apologize, I don't recall which other state it is. You can be convicted of a jury of 10. And the reason why they did that is statistically, what they realized, Europeans, colonizers, is that a jury in the South would most likely not have more than 2 African jurors, so that they could convict people to life or to with having 10 jurors. And so now they've been looking at a lot of the 10-2s cases there, and so several people who were, you know, who've done like, you know, 20, 30 years have been let out, but there's still many, many others. And so I think that we also have to play a role in organizing with our people behind the walls, and as well as remembering the political prisoners who fought for our freedom and who are still behind the walls incarcerated. So thank you all for letting me share a little bit about my journey in the South. It was one of the 10 best days of my life, and also heavy, very heavy, to see things and hear things, but so much hope. And I'm so glad I'm a member of the AAPRP, as well as connected to Millions for Prisoners and the other groups in the South as we fight to free our people.
Thank you so much, Monica. I definitely learned a lot from that. That was amazing. Your trip sounds incredible. And like learning about Maroons in the US, that was dope. Very dope. And I also really appreciated how you pointed out that our people are catching hell everywhere, whether it's like in the South, in these prisons built on plantations, whether it's in Tiwa territory, we're getting gentrified out, we're being killed by police, even though people are taking pictures with police, even though we're being gentrified out of our communities. And then overseas, the U.S. military footprint in Africa, the scramble for Africa's resources that's leaving African people out in the cold, the sanctions against African nations and nations fighting U.S. imperialism. And that's like a really, really good segue to talk about our political education topic for the program today. And we want to talk about how the world, it's actually like a global movement, is acting in solidarity with Cuba against the U.S. attacks on Cuba, and how the U.S. is responding. So for the past 2 months here in Tiwa territory, we've been organizing caravans for Cuba solidarity. It was an ask that actually came directly from our Cuban comrades in the Institute of Friendship with the Peoples, ECAP. And they're basically like, can y'all do this? Like, can you bring this to Albuquerque? Can you like join the rest of the people that are doing this on the last Sunday of every month all over the world, so we can start to build like a truly global movement of these caravans? And we were like, of course, like if someone you're in solidarity with comes to you, makes a direct ask, you gotta do it. So we organized our first caravan last month, and it was great. It was a success. We met at the Walmart on San Mateo, the lit Walmart, and drove up and down Central and got like a lot of love and a lot of support. I was actually kind of shocked because we had our car. It was very clear why we were there. There's a Cuban flag on every car. There was writing on all of our windows talking about the blockade. We were honking and making a scene, and people from the sidewalk were like, yeah, Cuba, like they were into it. And I was like, whoa, Albuquerque. So we, of course, had to do it again because it's a monthly action. But for June, we had it actually on the third Sunday of the month. It's usually the last Sunday. In June, we had it on the third Sunday, so June 20th. And the reason why we did that is because this past Wednesday, yesterday the 23rd, there was actually a vote at the United Nations on a resolution that is presented by Cuba at every single meeting of the General Assembly. And what that resolution is calling for is for ending the U.S.'s economic, commercial, and financial blockade on Cuba. So that vote happened on Wednesday, June 23rd, yesterday. We had our car caravan on Sunday to spread the word about it, to let people know it's happening. And again, it was a great success. Again, we got a lot of love. We met some new comrades, including members of the Pastors for Peace delegation who live in Tiwa territory, as well as a Cuban comrade who was like just happened to be there. So Angelica, shout out to Angelica. So yeah, it was a great success. We got to talk to people about the vote. And then the vote went down yesterday, and there were a lot of expectations around this vote. And the reason for that is that although for the past 4 years, the Trump administration has escalated U.S. attacks on Cuba, during the height of the COVID-19 pandemic, when Cuba was sending doctors all over the planet, when Cuba was sending medicine all over the planet, when Cuba was scrambling to save the planet, to like save lives during this pandemic, the Trump administration chose that moment to tighten economic restrictions on Cuba. They wanted to apply maximum suffering. And so they cut off remittances. Remittances are basically like when your family emigrates to the United States, a relative will usually send money back to the people that are living in the place you came from, so back to Cuba or back to Honduras in the case of my family. And that's like a massive part of the economy of a lot of countries, is people traveling to the United States and then sending money back. So the Trump administration cut that off. They said, Cubans, you cannot send money to your own family during the height of the pandemic. They also declared Cuba a state sponsor of terrorism, which is absurd. Cuba is not a state sponsor of terrorism. Cuba has actually suffered continuous terrorist attacks sponsored and funded by the U.S. government. I am not kidding. There's actually a movie on Netflix about it that's really good called The Wasp Network. It has Penelope Cruz in it. It's actually like it's accurate history. And what that movie shows is that the U.S. or U.S. surrogates would literally pay people from Miami and from Central and South American countries to travel to Cuba and plant bombs in civilian areas. Like they show a hotel bombing that actually happened, that was paid for by the United States. So that is just one example of actually U.S.-sponsored terrorist attacks against Cuba and attempts to destabilize Cuba and overthrow the Cuban government. But Cuba has never done anything like that to the United States or to anyone, quite frankly. And despite that fact, the U.S. declared them under Trump a state sponsor of terrorism. And when you're declared a state sponsor of terrorism by the U.S. empire, it further cuts you off from access to trade. It further cuts you off from diplomacy with other nations. It's just another way of isolating Cuba. And again, this was done at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic because they wanted to apply maximum pain. So that's what Trump did. But before Trump was in, Barack Obama was, of course, president. And although Barack Obama was a warmonger, although Barack Obama is a piece of trash, Barack Obama also drastically reevaluated U.S. relations with Cuba. We saw a warming of U.S. and Cuban relations. We saw opened up travel. We saw lessened economic restrictions. We saw the first travel of a U.S. president to Cuba since the Cuban Revolution. Obama sat down with Fidel Castro. And so there was the sense that it was like a new day under the Obama administration. And in fact, in 2016, when Cuba's resolution was brought to a vote at the United Nations General Assembly, because again, they presented it at every single assembly, 1992, so it's been over 20 years. So when, in 2016, that resolution was presented to the UN, the Obama administration abstained from the vote. For over 20 years, the U.S. had voted no on that resolution, meaning no, we refuse to condemn our blockade. In 2016, Obama abstained, and that was the first time the U.S. had ever done that in history, and people were like, damn, it's clearly a new day. So then Trump comes in, all those steps back, then Biden, of course, is elected, and on the 2020 presidential campaign trail, Biden strongly signaled that he was going to return to the Obama administration's policy towards Cuba. He attacked the Trump administration's foreign policy. He said it made no sense. He said the blockade doesn't work. he said that they had to reevaluate everything and like do something that was actually effective. And so people were like, okay, this man was vice president when Obama was president. This is the move the Obama administration makes. He's saying that he's going to follow in their footsteps, so this is going to be better. And it was, in fact, like a lot of, Cuban people living in the U.S. who want to be able to visit their family, who want to be able to send money to their families, were like supporting Biden on that basis. They thought he would do what he said he would do. But what do we know about these people? What do we know about these Europeans? What do we know about the white people's house? They lie, y'all. They just lie. And so the vote came up on the resolution yesterday, and the Biden administration voted no on that resolution. They are one of only 2 countries, the other one being Israel, that voted no on the resolution condemning the U.S. blockade. However, there are, let me see, what's the total number? I'm looking at, there are 193 nations in the United Nations. 2, the U.S. and Israel, voted no on this resolution. But guess how many nations voted in favor of the resolution condemning the blockade? Of 193 nations in the UN, 184 nations voted in favor of the resolution condemning the blockade. 184 of 193 accepted this resolution. 3 abstained, and the 3 abstentions are very, very interesting. The first was Ukraine, which in 2014, under President Barack Obama, had its government straight up overthrown. They were couped, and it was a U.S.-backed coup, and the U.S. put in power literal Nazis, y'all, like straight up kill Jews. Nazis are in power in Ukraine. Thanks to the United States government, they are, of course, tightly allied with the U.S. because of that coup, and so Ukraine abstained to show support with the United States. The second abstention was Colombia. Colombia, y'all. Colombia, you should know, receives nearly $500 million in U.S. military aid every single year. And what does Colombia do with that U.S. military aid? Well, if y'all recall, a couple of weeks ago, we had our comrade Gamir from the Vencedemus Brigade, who's actually Colombian, talking about the state of conditions there, talking about how there's a massive poor and working class people's uprising and African indigenous people's uprising happening in Colombia. And the Duque government is violently repressing it, live firing on protesters, sending out militarized police to brutalize and kill people. And that, guess what that military funding is used for? To train those police, to arm those police. Colombia is a very close U.S. ally in South America. Colombia serves as a base of operations for U.S. imperialist interventions in South America. Like, the U.S. is constantly attacking Venezuela and using Colombia as the base to do so. So Hugo Chavez even went so far as to call Colombia the Israel of Latin America, precisely because of that U.S. puppet status they have, precisely because of that pattern of taking billions of dollars in U.S. aid and using it to repress their own people. So Colombia was the second abstention. I just wanted to give you some context for why that happened. And the third abstention was, of course, the United Arab Emirates, another key U.S. ally, key U.S. military and political ally in the Middle East. So the 3 abstentions were basically U.S. puppet states. And the second no, Israel, is also a U.S. puppet state. And then literally everybody else, 184 additional nations were like, actually, we want to roll with Cuba. We would like to trade with Cuba. We actually don't understand why you're blockading Cuba. This blockade makes no sense. And so before the vote was taken, and this is like typical of, UN General Assemblies, they'll have like a bunch of speeches about the resolution that's up for a vote before the actual vote happens. And so I was watching those speeches yesterday, because you can actually like watch everything that happens in the UN on YouTube. It's kind of cool. So I was watching those speeches yesterday, and UN delegates from Azania, South Africa, Egypt, Togo, Singapore, China, Venezuela, Antigua, Namibia, Bolivia, the Philippines, and more. That's an incomplete list. All of those nations gave remarks condemning the U.S. blockade on Cuba, all from different perspectives. They talk about how Cuba sent doctors to their countries during COVID and saved lives. They talked about the Cuban vaccines that Cuba wants for COVID, that Cuba wants to distribute all over the world. They talked about how Cuba has showed up in solidarity with anti-colonial struggles throughout the colonized world, particularly in Africa and Central and South America. They're basically like, Cuba is a good comrade. Cuba shows up for us. What are y'all doing? But additionally, the delegates in their remarks before the vote on the UN resolution were also like, this blockade is illegal and genocidal. This blockade is a violation of the United Nations Charter and a violation of international law. It is also, the delegate said, a direct attack on the concept of national sovereignty. It is an act of collective punishment, making the Cuban people suffer and attempting to control which nations are able to do business with Cuba. The United States is basically saying, if you do business with Cuba, we're going to punish you and we're going to punish them. They're attempting to control which nations can trade with which nations. That is attack on national sovereignty. So all these delegates were like, not only does this make no sense, because Cuba is good, Cuba is helpful, Cuba shows up in solidarity, but it also makes no sense because if y'all can do this to Cuba, if you can pick and choose who gets to trade with Cuba, then you can do that to any of us. And the concept of national sovereignty does not exist. The U.S. blockade on Cuba is an illegal act of war, and if Cuba gets it, that means anyone can get it, and these delegates understood that. So that was the basis of the remarks. And then, of course, the vote happened, and the vast majority of the nations on the planet were like, we call for an end of this blockade. 184 out of 193 member nations of the United Nations voted to condemn the U.S. blockade on Cuba, called for the end of the U.S. blockade on Cuba. Only Israel, Colombia, Ukraine, and the United Arab Emirates dissented from that. So you would think if like 184 nations were like, U.S. need to stop this, like what is this? You would think that the UN could like make the U.S. stop, right? Like the majority of the world wants them to stop, so why can't they make them stop? Well, the problem is that the UN resolution is non-binding. And what that means is that the United Nations actually has no capacity whatsoever to get the U.S. to follow that resolution. The entire rest of the world is like, stop bullying Cuba, and the U.S. is like, no thank you. And there's literally nothing that anyone can do. There's nothing that anyone can do. So the vote on the United Nations resolution does in fact show that the United States government is incredibly isolated when it comes to these attacks on Cuba. Even like NATO countries like France, like Britain, like Spain, like European powers that typically align with the U.S. when it comes to imperialism, when it comes to the U.S. blockade on Cuba, they're like, what are you doing? Like they want to trade with Cuba. Even close U.S. allies in the West do not agree with the blockade, and it makes no difference. The UN has no capacity whatsoever to compel the United States to follow this resolution. The United States does what the United States wants to do. And if folks recall, I was talking to comrades in Hood Communists about why this is, right? Because they were like, 184 countries said no. Why is the U.S. still allowed to do this? And the example I use, or the way I explained it, is like the Black Bush skit on Chappelle Show. Do you know what I'm talking about, Monica? Okay,
I watched it last night.
Okay, so Dave Chappelle is like mad problematic. I feel like that man got too rich. He got too rich. He got too much of that white money, and then he just like fucking turned his back. But before that happened, Chappelle Show actually like consistently had like good political analysis, including
all the time.
So like Chappelle Show to me, like I'll still watch it. Even though the man today, I just do not fuck with him. But I'll still watch Chappelle Show because it's funny as hell. And also the analysis very often is quite accurate. The analysis of race, the analysis of capitalism, the analysis of class, and also the analysis of imperialism. So in this Black Bush skit, it's like a send-up, like a satire of how the U.S. under George W. Bush pushed towards the invasion of Iraq that overthrew Saddam Hussein. And if folks recall, like I was like probably 18, 19. If folks recall, the United States wanted to do this, and Bush was like, it's because of 9/11, and also because claimed that Saddam Hussein tried to kill his dad. I don't even know. But in the run-up to this intervention, this invasion of Iraq, the U.S. was actually incredibly isolated. The entire rest of the world, and also millions of people within the United States were like, why are you doing this? We don't actually want to go to war. Can you just leave them alone? And Bush is like, no. And so what that skit is talking about is just showing how Bush like went like railroaded over everybody, aligned with like France and Britain, and then decided to invade Iraq. Actually, no, France didn't agree with it. I remember like the Freedom Prize thing. They like stopped using the word French. They replaced the word French with freedom.
That's right, I remember that.
Yeah, yeah. So France wasn't going with it, but Britain and the United States aligned to invade Iraq against the wishes of the entire world. And of course, one of the major claims of that period was that Iraq had weapons of mass destruction. The UN sent inspectors into Iraq, and they're like, there's nothing here. Bush was like, you're lying. We found the smoking gun. Of course, it all turned out to be bullshit. But the UN was like, there's no weapons of mass destruction. You don't actually have any, like, you know, international law basis to invade this country. This is an illegal act. We do not accept it. And Bush is like, what are you going to do? What are you going to do about it? Like, how are you going to stop me? We're going to do it anyway. The UN was like, please don't. And Bush was like, no. And then the UN had no capacity whatsoever to stop the US government under George W. Bush from invading this sovereign nation, killing its leader, and throwing it into chaos that exists to this day. And so that's just another example of the actual relationship between the United States and the UN. The United States has an outsized amount of power within the United Nations, and they can compel the United Nations to invade other countries, to occupy other countries, to align with sanctions or to impose sanctions itself. But when it comes to getting the US to act right, the United Nations has no power whatsoever.
So can I ask a clarification question?
Yes.
So with the vote, 184 people voted yes. And so this raggedy country voted no, and Israel, you mentioned, and others abstained. And so will those countries be able to trade, or will they not trade because of the U.S. empire?
So they'll still, like Cuba, so one time Brazil abstained from the vote, and there were Cuban doctors in Brazil. And then when Jair Bolsonaro came to power, they expelled the doctors. And then when COVID hit, they were like, doctors come back. So very often, these countries, I believe that's the case with Colombia as well, very often these countries will still do business with Cuba, will still accept Cuban medical aid, will still, like, you know, ask for the Cuban medical technology. They will still do it because Cuba will help whoever. And these countries need it. They very often have no internal medical infrastructure because of neoliberalism imposed by the United States. So they'll still trade with Cuba, but when it comes to saying, like, backing up the U.S., when Cuba calls, or when the U.S. calls Cuba a state sponsor of terrorism, when it comes to backing up the U.S. By not condemning the blockade, these countries will fall in line because the U.S. assigns the checks. So they'll still take from Cuba, but they won't stand up for Cuba. Raggy.
And so some of them did at the UN, at the vote. Some of them did at the vote. And so I wonder, will that compel them to continue to, like, speak truth to power and to continue to, like, say what's true and say what's right versus aligning with the blockade?
Yeah, like I said, even close to U.S. allies, like European countries, like France, like Spain, Britain, like Belgium, even those countries, when it comes to the U.S. blockade on Cuba, are like telling the U.S. to stop, telling the U.S. to drop it. Like Spain has openly said, like, the U.S. blockade on Cuba doesn't make sense. They've lobbied U.S. representatives. They said, like, we want to do business with Cuba, but the blockade makes it too risky. We don't want to get fines or sanctions imposed by the United States for trying to do business with Cuba, because that's what it does, right? It's not just the United States saying don't do that. It's the United States saying, if you do trade with this country, we will freeze your bank accounts. We will fine you millions of dollars. We will shut down your company if there any offices exist on U.S. land. So these countries literally can't a lot of times. The U.S. is literally just, like, throwing its weight around to make sure that no one does trade with Cuba.
Even though the resolution passed, but it's not binding. There's no way to uphold the resolution. Wow.
Yep. Isn't that wild? Isn't that wild? Like, the whole world is like, no. And the U.S. is like, we do not care. We do not care. Like, they're going to continue. And again, Biden promised that he was going to return to the Obama era policies for Cuba. He ran on that. He used it to get votes. And then as soon as he got into office, that red-haired lady, Jen Psaki, or whatever her name is, was like, it's not a priority for us at this time. Like, they were just like, and then, like, a month ago, so the Trump administration designated Cuba a state sponsor of terrorism at the height of the COVID-19 pandemic. Biden promised to assess that evaluation. But in a month ago, Secretary of State Antony Blinken sent a letter to Congress basically saying, yes, Cuba is a state sponsor of terrorism. And that's Biden's appointee. So he just, like, completely, like, did a 180. He was like, never mind, I'm going to keep doing the Trump administration policy toward Cuba. And not only is that happening to Cuba, but if you pay attention to Biden's foreign policy, it's happening across the board. He is continuing the Trump administration policies toward China, toward Iran, toward Nicaragua, towards Zimbabwe, towards Venezuela, like all these places where he promised to be more reasonable, to reevaluate, to take the hammer off. He was like, he just like completely, like, actually, Trump did good. I'm going to follow that. That's precisely what he's doing. And no one's paying attention because, so yeah. So that was some context about the UN vote, about how that went down yesterday, and also about the relationship between the United Nations and the United States. Basically, bottom line, the UN cannot compel the United States to do a goddamn thing. Goddamn thing. The U.S. is going to do what the U.S. wants to do. The pressure to end the blockade cannot come from the United Nations. The United Nations straight up does not have the power to end the blockade. In fact, the only people that can end the blockade are either the sitting U.S. president, so Joe Biden, or an act of Congress. That's the only way the U.S. blockade on Cuba can be ended. The United Nations cannot do it. All the United Nations vote does is show that the U.S. is incredibly isolated when it comes to maintaining this blockade, incredibly isolated on an international scale. And it also shows that no one, even like the majority of the nations on Earth, asking the U.S. to do something will not compel the U.S. to do it. That is the position that this empire plays on the planet. It throws its weight around. It is a massive bully. It attacks much smaller and much weaker nations. And then it's like, what are you going to do about it? It is like the quintessential bully of this country. So that's the situation with the vote. And I want to talk also briefly about like why the U.S. is doing this. Because we talked about the blockade. It's cost Cuba's economy billions of dollars in the 60 years it's been in place. It has cost mass migration from Cuba. Like, people talk about people leaving Cuba like they're fleeing socialism. No, they're fleeing because the blockade makes conditions nearly unlivable for quite a few people. They're not fleeing because they don't want to live in Cuba. They're fleeing because the blockade makes it incredibly difficult to live. And then when they get here, the United States, the government will do things like pass bans or remittances, so they can't even send money back to their families in Cuba. So you see the pressure being applied on both sides. And so the U.S. is not attacking Cuba because of the dictatorship. The U.S. is not attacking Cuba because Cuba represses its own people. The U.S. is attacking Cuba because Cuba is a socialist country that overthrew U.S. imperialism. Cuba is a socialist country that fought and won an armed struggle within a revolution to trace the U.S. off of its territory. Cuba is a socialist revolutionary country that is majority African, that sits less than 100 miles off the coast of the United States. American mythology states that the U.S. is the greatest country on earth, and that capitalism is the only economic system that works and that can exist. And then less than 100 miles off the shore is a majority African revolutionary socialist country that does not accept capitalism, that is still thriving despite 60 years of attacks against its revolution. So Cuba is an example that shows all of what the U.S. claims about the world, about revolution, about economics is not true. Cuba is an example of how people can accomplish, even against incredible odds, even fighting an empire, what people can accomplish when they commit to liberation, when they are organized. Cuba is an example the U.S. cannot allow to exist. And the reason why I stress that it's majority African and has had a majority African population since the 1700s. So the whole myth of American nationalism is swept up in the concept of white supremacy, of the concept of the idea that European people are superior to everybody else. And again, here's this majority African country, revolutionary socialist country, that waged an armed struggle, defeated U.S. imperialism, defeated Spanish imperialism before that, built a socialist country in the backyard of the United States, and was able to defend their revolution for over 60 years. If European people are supposed to be superior, then how the hell did those Africans pull that off? It just shows it's a lie. And it shows it's a lie. So the United States is attacking Cuba because it's socialist. The United States is attacking Cuba because it resists imperialism. And the United States is attacking Cuba because Cuba is a majority African country in the backyard of a white supremacist superpower. That is why the United States is attacking Cuba. That is why the U.S. blockade on Cuba exists. When the U.S. blockade on Cuba was passed as policy, they stated explicitly that the objective of that blockade was to make the Cuban people suffer so much that they would overthrow their government. That was the explicit stated objective of the U.S. blockade on Cuba. They wanted to cause so much mass suffering, not to the Cuban government, but to the Cuban people, that those people would rise up and overthrow their government. But it's been 60 years, y'all. Not going to happen. The Cuban people are not going to abandon their revolution. They built that country, that government, that way of life from the ground up. They fought and bled and died for it. They defended it all over the world. They like helped revolutions all over Africa and Central and South America. Like those people have been through it. Have they fought for this reality? They are not going to give it up because the United States wants them to. It doesn't matter what the U.S. does. The blockade, in terms of its policy objectives, is a failure. It is a failure. It will never work. They are never going to abandon their resolution. No, it's not going to happen. So at this point, it's just an anachronism. At this point, it's just like a relic of the past. It is a failed strategy to destroy the Cuban Revolution, and all what it's doing at this point, and really all it's ever done, is make the most vulnerable people in Cuba suffer, force people who love Cuba to leave to survive. That's all it does. That is all it does. It is just cruelty. Just cruelty. It is punishment for the crime of the Cuban people liberating themselves. That's what it is. That's what it is. That's why the U.S. attacks Cuba. And so understanding that, understanding why the U.S. is attacking Cuba, understanding what the attacks look like and who's actually suffering, just like regular Cuban people are suffering because of the actions of the United States, understanding that Africa and Central and South America depend on Cuban medical solidarity, and Cuban medical solidarity is hampered by the blockade. Understanding all of these facts, we as revolutionary people, as African people, have no choice but to stand in solidarity with Cuba. Like, that's just a fact. First of all, those are our relatives. Like I said, it's majority African, so it's like our cousins. But second of all, if Cuba is going to show up for us, if Cuba is still showing up for Africa, then we have a responsibility, particularly in the belly of the beast, to show up for Cuba as well. And also to tell the United States that you cannot attack a country for freeing itself. You cannot attack a country for choosing socialism. And you cannot attack a country for defying white supremacy. Like, absolutely not. Absolutely not. If they can do it to Cuba, they can do it to any of us, and we cannot allow that to happen. We have to show up in solidarity with Cuba. We have to show up when Cuba asks us to show up. That's, like I said, why we do the car caravans here in Tiwa territory. The next one is Sunday, July 25th. That's why after myself and my comrades from Pueblo Action Alliance traveled to Cuba with the Vencemos Brigade 2 years ago, we spent the next 2 years organizing in solidarity with Cuba. We do political education about Cuba every single month. We talk to people about Cuba constantly. We recruit for the trip constantly because we want to show our people the truth about it. But we understand the responsibility we have to that nation to show up for them. And the other thing I want to say is that there's the responsibility of solidarity. They're showing up for our African people in Cuba. They're showing the United States that they cannot attack a country for liberating itself. But also, the example of the Cuban Revolution is extremely important for those of us who are still fighting for justice, who are still fighting for our liberation. Because what it shows is that a drastically outnumbered and outgunned people can win against a much stronger enemy with a high level of organization. The Cuban people organized for 50 years to win the armed phase of that revolution, and they organized for 60 more years to build socialism in their nation, and it's still an ongoing process. They won in an armed struggle against the most dangerous empire on the face of the planet, and they continue to live on their own terms to this day. For those of us who are still oppressed and exploited in the United States, for those of us that are still fighting white supremacy and capitalism and settler colonialism on that land, we need to learn from the example of Cuba. We need to learn from how they accomplished this victory so we can replicate it. It is an extremely important living example of the power of revolution and what we can accomplish if we organize. We have to protect Cuba because Cuba won, y'all, and we need to win too. So that's what I want to say. Like, stand in solidarity with Cuba, rise in solidarity with Cuba. Show up for the car caravan in your city if it exists. If the car caravan doesn't exist, then organize one. I was kind of shocked at how easy it was to organize a car caravan. I was like, well, damn. We just like set a starting location, Roosevelt Park, this past Sunday. We like bought like the window crayons, the Crayola window crayons. We got like 3 boxes of them. We got Cuban flags. We got 20 of them for like $12 for the car windows. And we made sure that every single car was decorated, and we just decided to go up and down Central. It literally took like a few days to organize it, and we could make it even bigger with a little bit more work. But if you just make it basic as hell, like just decide a starting location, decide a route, make sure that every single car is decorated, and then honk and play music as you're going down the street so people see you, that's literally all you have to do. That's all you have to do. So on the last Sunday of July, July 25th, if you're in Tiwa territory, come to our caravan at noon. Location to be announced soon, the starting location. And if there's no car caravan in your area, then feel free to start one. You don't need permission. You can do what you want. You're free. So please, 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 we need to show up for Cuba. We need to stand in solidarity with Cuba. We need to resist the bullying of this government. This government thinks that they can push everybody around. No, absolutely not. Tell them it's not okay. Show them it's not okay. Show them that the entire world, 184 nations, says you need to stop this, and the people living here say you need to stop this, okay? Because that's what it's gonna take. We have to apply pressure from inside the United States and outside the United States to compel this country to act right. This is what we need to do. That is the political education on Cuba. Like I said, stay tuned for details about the next Cuba Solidarity car caravan happening in Tiwa territory, Sunday, July 25th at noon. Okay, what are you people saying? First of all, Monica, people said your braids are popping. They like the shirt. They're into the look, and I am as well. The braids are amazing.
Thank you, comrades.
Jamila, greetings, comrade Jamila from the AAPRP Kaji Circle, said they don't use Netflix, but might have to watch it to watch this movie. What is the name of it? That movie, once again, is The Wasp Network, starring Penelope Cruz and some other people. I wish I knew the names. I don't. But it's about U.S.-funded terrorist attacks on Cuba and extremely brave Cuban people that went undercover in the United States to stop those attacks. Have you ever heard of the Cuban Five? 5 Cuban political prisoners that were imprisoned in the United States until an international campaign got them freed. That's the movie's about the Cuban Five and what they were doing. What they were doing was going undercover in the United States to infiltrate these terrorist cells that were bombing hotels and civilian locations in Cuba. So check it out, The Wasp Network on Netflix. Ricky from Hood Communist, greetings, comrade, says that Colombia is the Israel of Latin America. That is a quote of Hugo Chavez, who was like, Colombia is raggedy as hell. Colombia is basically a puppet right in our backyard. The United States uses Colombia as a base of operations to attack socialist countries throughout Central and South America, and Colombia just lets them do it. And then when the people in Colombia, who are African and indigenous, are like, we're tired of this, you're taking away all of our social services, you're raising the price of gas, you're making it so we can't live, and they go into the streets and they strike, the Colombian government uses U.S. money to kill its own people for the crime of fighting back and fighting for justice in the so Colombia is without question Israel, Latin America. U.S. said, who's gonna check me though? Yeah, the U.S. is very it's so raggedy. No one can really get the U.S. to do anything. Even its allies, if they're like, damn, why? The U.S. is like, get out of my face. The U.S. will really just do what it wants to do, and no one thus far, the United Nations cannot get them to act right. NATO cannot get them to act right. All of these forces that are supposed to be U.S. allies cannot get this country to act right. So it's gonna take a global mass movement that is organized and militant to get the U.S. to act right. So let's build it, y'all. People talking about the Black Bush sketch was very funny. That thing makes me laugh to this day. I watched it yesterday 3 times.
We ain't gotta listen to them. We do what we want. That's how this empire is.
Yep. Yeah. It's so accurate. Who else? Sounds like people in the U.S. want a vacation in Cuba but won't defend it. Yes. Okay, so when the Obama administration loosened travel restrictions, a lot of people began traveling to Cuba for tourism because Cuba is beautiful. It is a tropical island in the Caribbean. It has pristine, gorgeous beaches. Because Cuba has an extremely green economy, a truly green economy because they're socialists, but also specializes in organic agriculture and sustainable development. Cuba has pure, clean land, basically. They rehabilitated that land after the sugar plantations destroyed it. That was what the socialist revolution did to the land. And so for that reason, Cuba is gorgeous. It is a beautiful place. And so some people, when the Obama administration opened up the travel restrictions, would go there and just act a fool. Just you know what they do in the tourist destinations. They go there, they expect to be waited on hand and foot. They're rude to the people that live there. They engage in sex trafficking, they do drugs, all kinds of things people were doing. And so a lot of people traveled to Cuba, saw how beautiful it was. experienced the culture and the music and the food, but did not engage in like any kind of political work or any kind of like learning about the truth of the relationship between the U.S. and Cuba and the truth of the Cuban Revolution. So there's like a lot of people that have been to Cuba that don't know anything about what we discussed on the show. Yeah, it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate. Tourism is not positive. As someone whose family is like from like a tourist destination, it's from like beachfront property, all I've seen is like the tourism industry push people off of their land. I've seen like police like shoot down Garifuna youth because they're on the beach. I've seen like Garifuna's land get stolen. You know what I'm saying? Like the tourism industry is not a positive for the people that live in those places. So yeah. But then again, you know, tourism contributes to the economy of the country. And so if the economy is a socialist country, the resources that are made from tourism can be used to meet the needs of the people that live there. So it's like a give and a take. But under like the typical capitalist form of tourism, it's just like negative. It's just negative. So yeah, that's a very good point raised by Ricky. Also, hello, David. Hello, Bird. Hello, Obiama. Let me see. Sally Fu, also from Hood Communist, says the U.S. cuts off access to Cuba and provides no material resources or support to the people as an alternative. And those people are defending their revolution. As an African nation, I am so proud of Cuba. Absolutely, we should be proud of Cuba. We should understand the Cuban Revolution, the liberation of Cuba, as part of the overall struggle for Africa's liberation as well. Because like I said, majority African country since the 1700s. People in the United States think that Cubans look like Pitbull. No, they look like me and Monica. Cuba's majority African. So please, we need to consider Cuba's liberation as part of the global struggle for African liberation. The U.S. has no problems murdering most of the world to maintain its domination. Oni always gets me fired up talking about Cuba. Get fired up talking about Cuba. Okay, cool. So yeah, thanks y'all. Lots of really, really good comments. We appreciate y'all tuning in and talking to each other and commenting on what we're discussing. Y'all are great. So thank you so much. Oh yeah, and then Ricky recommending a book on what we were just talking about on tourism and how it's bad for the people that live there. Jamaican Kincaid's A Small Place is the best analysis for tourism. Small Place by Jamaica Kincaid. I've actually read that, but I will definitely check out. Okay, so that was the PE section. Let's keep it moving so we can wrap this up shortly. So next up, we want to talk about what's going on here in Tiwa territory in terms of the organizing of the All African People's Revolutionary Party and our comrades. Monica had to go to the plantation, but thank you, Monica. That was actually an incredible intro and also an incredible update for her road trip. So shout out to Monica, but let's continue. So New Mexico chapter updates. We are, of course, working on our Pan-African Community Garden. It has been up and thriving for 3 months now. We have a fence. We have raised beds full of plants, lots of tomatoes, lots of peppers, a whole bed full of corn. We got turnips, we got cucumbers, we got tomatillos. Someone gave us tomatillos. Like, we got like a thriving garden, y'all. But we also have a compost pile. And we built some shade structures because it's been 90 degrees and up for the past like 2 weeks. Usually in June, it gets to like the 80s here in Tiwa territory, but these past 2 weeks, it's been like extra super hot. Lots of over 100-degree days. And so the plants were kind of struggling. They were struggling. Too hot for them, even for the tomatoes. And so we built shade structures. We like put up PVC pipe, and then we like put shade cloth on the pipe, and then like wrap it around the beds. And so now the tomato plants have some shade. So they can grow a little bit easier. So we did that last Saturday. And then we also, the last time we had a community event at the garden, did a de-escalation training with some of the folks who come regularly. It was really, really cool. So we talked about our philosophy of de-escalation, which is that we center the humanity of the folks that we're intervening with. We center the fact that we want them to be part of the space and we want the space to be open to everybody. But also we center the fact that we want folks to be safe and feel welcome there. And so we like did some role playing and talked about how to intervene if someone was agitated or escalated. It was really cute, funny. People got their acting on. It was really nice. We got to practice with each other, and it was just like a cool, cool day. And now, every single time that we're going to be at the garden for a community event, we're going to have at least 2 people designated for safety and de-escalation, and we can do that thanks to that training. So thanks for all the folks that participated and for all your contributions to make that even better. Also, some unfortunate news about the garden is that we did have a fire that was set that damaged a little part of the fence. We are still trying to figure out the details of that. And figure out some strategies to prevent that from happening in the future. But we didn't want to give a shout out that did happen. and we are organizing to make sure it does not happen again. So if you would like to join us at the garden to do some work and to do some learning, we're going to be out there this coming Sunday starting at 5 o'clock, 5 p.m. We're going to be doing some political education, again, a little bit more about community defense and how we can use communities organized for community defense to organize against terrorism. Like once you start organizing block by block to get the neighborhood to take care of itself, you can also start organizing block by block to resist the U.S. empire. So we're going to talk about how we can make those connections and what that looks like. And we're also going to be talking about our values as an organization and the values that we bring to our community spaces, including not calling the police. So that's the PE. And in terms of the work that we're going to do at the garden, so our comrade Afro Phoenix, a New Mexico chapter, donated generously 2 pomegranate trees and 2 goji berry trees. So we're going to plant those. I'm reading about pomegranates and they love dry, hot conditions. I think they're going to do really, really well at Tiwa territory, so that's very exciting. Also, our tomato plants have been a little bit chewed. There was a whole branch missing leaves the last time we were there, which is a telltale sign of tomato hornworms. Tomato hornworms are green, big green caterpillars. They're freaking the dog. Big green caterpillars that have a horn, red dots. And those things love tomatoes. They love peppers. And if you have 3 or 4 of them, they will eat the entire plant. They will not leave a scrap. They'll even eat the tomatoes, y'all. The peppers, the tomatoes, the leaves, and they'll just be peace. After they eat the whole plant. So I think that we might have some of those. And there are some strategies you can use to find them and get rid of them. So we're going to do some hornworm hunting. If you're into that, bring the kids to play with bugs. And then we're also hoping to build some more benches so we can have seating around the garden. And also, of course, water the plants by refilling the oyas. Give them some plant food, organic plant food. That's all happening Sunday at the garden at 5 p.m. Please join us if you are available. It's going to be after 5. And also the heat wave is breaking, so it should be comfortable. It should be fine. But we'll have some shade, some water, some popsicles. Also, we are still doing our elder care program. So every single Saturday evening, we deliver care packages of groceries, PPE, personal protective equipment, political education to African elders here in Tiwa territory. We've been doing that for over a year, since March of last year, the beginning of the pandemic. And we will continue doing so for the foreseeable future. So that happens every single Saturday afternoon. And if you know an elder that would benefit from that program, feel free to email us at aprepnewmexico@gmail.com or give us a call or text at 505-295-0008. And we'll add them to our delivery list and bring them a care package every single Saturday. There is no cost and there is no obligation. Give it to you. Also, coming up in Tiwa territory, we have the return of in-person 4th of July. I cannot express how excited I am for the return of in-person events, especially 4th of July. 4th of July is happening Sunday, July 4th. It is the so-called American Independence Day, but we as African people and our indigenous comrades certainly know, and our Chicano comrades and our Filipino comrades and our Haitian, we know for a fact that we were not free on July 4th, 1776. That is not our Independence Day. The United States Empire is a force for evil in the world. It's a force for evil against our people, and so we are not going to celebrate that country on July 4th. No, we're going to celebrate resistance to the United States Empire on July 4th. We're going to have a gathering in the park with food, with childcare, with a cooling station, with popsicles, with community resources, with speakers, with music. It's going to be body workers. It's going to be incredible. It's going to be a good time. It's the first time we have done 4th of July since the pandemic. The last one was in 2019. So we want to do it big, and we want to welcome our community to celebrate how much we hate the United States. So please come through. Sunday, July 4th, 12 to 5 p.m., Phil Chacombe Park in the International District, the previous location of 4th of July, is going to be a great time. It is completely free, and you will learn a lot, and you will probably dance. Sunday, July 4th, Phil Chacombe Park, 12 to 5 p.m., 4th of July. And then lastly, coming up, actually, this goes on the APRP International update. I'm still going to do it because it's on the list. So coming up for the All-African Women's Revolutionary Union, which is the women's wing of the All-African People's Revolutionary Party, we are organizing Pan-African Women's Day. Pan-African Women's Day. And you don't know what that is? It's fine. I'm going to explain it to you. So, Pan-African Women's Day is held annually across the world to celebrate the first Pan-African Women's Congress and the creation of the Pan-African Women's Organization in 1962 in Dar es Salaam, Tanzania. 1 year prior to the establishment of the Organization of African Unity, women delegates from 14 independent African nations and 10 national liberation movements met at the first conference of African women that took place in Dar es Salaam. The organization that emerged was later called the Pan-African Women's Organization, and the day of their meeting, the 31st of July, was established worldwide as the Day of Women Pan-Africanists, or Pan-African Women's Day. So every single July 31st and throughout the month of August, all over the African world and worldwide Pan-African movement, revolutionary African organizations commemorate Pan-African Women's Day. It is a day to center the experiences of revolutionary African women, non-men, and youth. It is a day to talk about our contributions, our unquestionable contributions to the struggle to build Pan-Africanism and liberate Africa. This year, on July 31st, the All-African Women's Revolutionary Union is organizing a panel, a virtual webinar featuring a panel of young revolutionary African women talking about the role of sisters and youth in the struggle to build Pan-Africanism in the 21st century. So that panel is happening again Sunday, July 31st at 4 p.m. Greenwich Mean Time. That's like the time in Africa. It's going to be 10 a.m. Mountain Time. Saturday, July 31st at 10 a.m. Mountain Time. You're going to be hosting it on Zoom via a Zoom webinar for folks that need translation. We'll have translation into French and also translation to and from Portuguese. So if you need translation or you want to join us in Zoom so you can ask questions, I'm going to drop the registration link for Pan-African Women's Day in the chat. Oopsie days. And so you can register at that link. And then we're also going to be streaming it to the APRP Facebook, Twitter, and YouTube pages. And we're also going to be streaming it to the All African Women's Revolutionary Union Facebook page as well. Once again, that's happening Saturday, July 31st, 10 a.m. Mountain Time, 4 p.m. GMT. It's going to be a great time. We're going to have speakers from at the Amilcar Cabral Ideological Institute, which is a revolutionary organization in Nigeria that the APRP works with quite a lot. We're going to have Yoli and Ogbu from Horn of Africa, Pan-Africans for Solidarity and Liberation, representing Eritrea. We're going to have my comrade Maureen Cass from the Revolutionary Socialist League of Kenya. We're going to have a comrade Imam from the AWU and Burkina Faso. That's 4 incredibly strong panelists speaking on that theme of African women and youth building Pan-Africanism in the 21st century. And there's more. We're going to have a keynote speaker from Udamu. Udamu is the women's wing of the PIGC, and the PIGC is, of course, the organization that organized the masses of African people in Guinea-Bissau to defeat Portuguese colonialism. They still exist. They are still building Pan-Africanism and fighting for revolution. They have a women's wing. That women's wing is Udamu, and Udamu will be on the panel, y'all. They're going to be giving the keynote speech at the event. We'll also have moderators from the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania and the AWU as well. So it's a truly Pan-African event. Nigeria, Kenya, Eritrea, hold on. Burkina Faso, Azania, Toronto, and Guinea-Bissau are going to be represented in one event. So please register at the link I just dropped in the chat and tune in Saturday, July 31st, 10 a.m. Mountain Time for Pan-African Women's Day. It's going to be awesome. Other things that are going on for the All African People's Revolutionary Party on an international scale. So as Monica mentioned, did the ancestor, Kwame Ture. His birthday is next Tuesday. And so for this entire weekend, the All African People's Revolutionary Party is going to be honoring our ancestor, honoring Kwame Ture. First up, on Moya Mzuri's Revolutionary African Woman podcast happening Saturday, the 26th at 3 p.m. We're going to have a tribute to Kwame Ture featuring Mukasa Ricks, his comrade from SNCC. Mukasa Ricks was, of course, the man that coined the term Black Power. Mukasa Ricks is also a member of the All African People's Revolutionary Party in Georgia. Mukasa Ricks was a close comrade of Kwame Ture, and so Moya Mzuri, who also known Kwame Ture when he was alive, they're going to be chopping it up and talking about his influence and his legacy. And then on Sunday, and I should have found the flyer, but I'm going to show the flyer at the end of the show. Black Power Media is collaborating with the All African People's Revolutionary Party to present a virtual tribute to Kwame Ture, talking about his life, talking about his work, showing some little scene clips of him talking about the movement. So it should be a very good time. And we, of course, appreciate the support of Black Power Media all the time. Those are our comrades. So tune in to the Kwame Ture tribute on Black Power Media Sunday, June 27th. It's happening at 8 a.m. Pacific time, which is 9 a.m. Mountain time, 11 a.m. Eastern, 3 p.m. UTC, live on Black Power Media. Tribute to. Also, if you haven't yet, definitely please check out Ajamu Umi's book, Friend of the Program, the man who recruited me into the APRP. He wrote this book, A Guide for Organizing Defense Against White Supremacist, Patriarchal, and Fascist Violence. It is like $8. It is a step-by-step, like literally step-by-step guide to organizing revolutionary community defense in your neighborhood. If you have always wondered how you can build a cop watch, how you can build a garden, how you can build a school or a tenants union or any kind of institution that's going to meet the needs of the people in your community, buy this book. Buy the book. It's less than $8. It's available at Amazon.com. It is a step-by-step guide to building revolutionary institutions for community defense. I highly recommend it. Everybody in the APRP has talked about it. It's a very good book. Also, this show, Weekly Pan-African News, Thursdays at 12 p.m. Mountain Time, is actually only one of 5 shows presented by members of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. There are 5 separate APRP podcasts in existence. You can basically listen to us all week if you want to. Why would you not want to? Why would you not want to? We're great. So first up, we got the Pantsula podcast presented by the Kaji Work Study Circle out of New York. That premieres Mondays at 6 p.m. Mountain Time. They have an episode every week. It's a very good podcast. That's like very strong analysis coming from those Africans. Every time I watch them, I'm like, yes. It's very good. I think the last show was my comrade Jamila talking to comrade Evan about the policing of African women's bodies that happens under capitalism and imperialism. An extremely important subject. Please check that out on the Pantsula podcast. You can find it on the Kaji APRP YouTube channel. Also, Ajamu and Shakora, the same Ajamu that wrote this book that you should buy. Ajamu and Shakora have a weekly show every single Sunday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time. Last week, I believe they talked about Zionist attacks on Israel or something about patriarchy. And this week on their show, they're going to talk about how people can be allies in the struggle to end patriarchy. Another very important subject. That's Sunday at 5 p.m. Mountain Time on Ajamu's Facebook page, facebook.com/ajamu.umi. You can also watch episodes afterwards on the APRP International YouTube channel. Again, every single Sunday, 5 p.m. Mountain Time. Also, Conrad Mzuri, who is another friend of the program, another person who brought me up or mentored me in the APRP, has the Revolutionary African Woman podcast once a month on Saturdays. The next episode is this coming Saturday, the 26th, and it's the tribute to Kwame Ture. That's again happening at 3 p.m. Mountain Time, and you can watch it on the Revolutionary African Woman Facebook page. And lastly, there's the Forward Ever podcast, which you can listen to on Spotify and wherever you listen to podcasts, presented by members of the APRP Social Media Task Force. So 5 separate APRP podcasts for you to partake of, get some political education, get some jokes, like Ajamu's hilarious, I'm hilarious, so get some jokes, get some knowledge, get some history, tune in, please, to our content. So that's the end of the show. I want to appreciate y'all so much. Someone said Pan-Africanism intensifies. I don't know what that was a reference to, but I like it. So thank you so much for joining us. My comrade Monica was here with us earlier. My name is Onya Sanu. We are both members of the New Mexico chapter of the All African People's Revolutionary Party. This is our program, Weekly Pan-African News. We do this every single Thursday at 12 p.m. Mountain Time, which means we're going to be back next Thursday with another show. Next Thursday, we're going to have a guest, Comrade Obi Egbuna. I apologize, Comrade, for mangling your name. Obi Egbuna, he is a pinnacle of an example of revolutionary African solidarity with the Cuban Revolution. He does a great amount of incredible work in the Cuba Solidarity movement here in the United States. He's going to be talking about the Saving Lives campaign, the second phase of the Saving Lives campaign, where we are going to be mobilizing to provide material support for Cuban medical solidarity in Africa. He's also going to be talking about the history of Cuba and Africa. It's going to be a lot of knowledge dropped. If you know that brother at all, you know he's going to drop some knowledge. So please tune in next Thursday for that interview at 12 p.m. Mountain Time. Also, it's Thursday, which means there's new articles on Hood Communists. New articles on hoodcommunists.org. We have 5 new articles. There's 2 of the 5 up. I'm actually the one that posts them, so after this, put the rest of them up. So check them out. Read the 2 that are up there now. Please read the rest when they're posted. Read them, share them, spread them far and wide. And also, this Thursday, this afternoon, is our weekly chat. in the Hood Communist official Telegram channel. We have a Telegram channel because if you recall, we were unceremoniously kicked off Twitter forever. We appealed it. Twitter was like, get the fuck up out of here. They said we don't want us on there. We're too African. We're too socialist. They weren't having it. So we're not on Twitter anymore. We're not trying to be on Twitter anymore. Then we started this Telegram channel where we can post all of our articles and different work that members of the Hood Communist Collective are engaging in. And we can also go live and have like live audio conversations with the people in the channel. So we do that every other week on Thursday. And this Thursday, we're going to be talking about our comrades in the Lukman Nation. Of course, our comrade Baba Lukman recently tragically passed. And we're going to be talking about the legacy that he left behind, the work that he and Jackie Lukman do together for the Lukman Nation and for Black Alliance for Peace, the incredible example of revolutionary African love that they represented. Like, yeah, we're going to talk about everything, and we're going to honor those comrades. So please tune in today at 5:30 p.m. Mountain Time, 7:30 p.m. Eastern Time in the Hood Communist Telegram channel, and I will put the link in the chat right now, if I can find it. That's Hood Communist. I also wanted to take a break from talking. Okay, so yeah, I put that link in the chat. Join us on Telegram. You will have to download the app. And then once you download the app, click that link and you'll be added to the channel. And then you can hear us go live at 5:30 p.m. And again, read Hood Communist, hoodcommunist.org. Share the articles, please. Don't let Twitter hate on our game. Spread them far and wide. So I want to wrap up by saying, if you have enjoyed this program, if you are listening to us speak, if you can see my face right now, and you're not active in an organization fighting for justice, we need you in an organization fighting for justice, comrade. We need you off the sidelines and into the front lines with us. We are facing the most organized enemy that humanity and this planet has ever seen in the system of capitalism and imperialism, and it's only the superior organization of oppressed people around the world that's going to destroy that system and replace it with something better. It is an all hands on deck kind of situation. Just as Monica said earlier, it is either we organize and build socialism and destroy capitalism, or we die. Those are the options. So if you would prefer to live and be socialist, then join an organization fighting for justice. If you're African, we would welcome you in the Awesome People's Revolutionary Party. If you're not African, congratulations. There are thousands of organizations available for you to join. So please join an organization. Or if the organization you want to see does not exist, build that organization, y'all. And if you don't know how, buy the book. So thank you so much for joining us. My name is Onya Sanwu. This has been Weekly Pan-African News. Stay tuned for some tunes and some flyers for upcoming events. And have a great rest of your day.
Dede